Hey YouTube, how you doing today? How you doing, all you killer green bud lovers? Anyways, I'm here to discuss with you today about a topic that is pretty much essential to my main channel, Killer Green Buds. And it's to debunk a myth that is pretty popular in today's weed culture. And it kind of irritates me. And that is that the weed has gotten better since the 1960s, or considerably better, like 4 or 5 times as good. You know, the average percentage of THC in today's marijuana that you find is usually right around 20%. You know, you have some that are, you know, as low as 15% and some as high as almost 30%. So, what they're essentially saying is back in the mid-60s, when marijuana smoking really got popular and big, that they're saying that the weed back then was only 5 to, let's say, 8% THC. Okay. Wrong. Sorry. The only reason for that is because the accessibility of the good weed. My uncle was in Vietnam, and he began smoking weed over there. He was in the Navy. He got some weed from over there called Thai stick. You may have heard it. And there was many other weeds back then. And he says that's some of the best stuff he's ever smoked, even up to this day. Now, may it be he was a beginning smoker, but you know, he's been smoking for almost 50 years now, so I tend to believe him. You know, between him and my dad, who you've seen in a few of my videos, my dad tells me there was only a handful of times back in the mid-60s and all the way up until about the 80s that he seen really good weed. For example, like Panama Red, Acapulco Gold, Maui Wowie, these Skunk Number 1, all these classic weeds that you hear about on a regular basis or have heard about through history, you know, from your guys' talks and conversations with your fellow stoners. But these strains were out there in even in the 40s and 30s, but they just weren't accessible. And smoking weed in the 30s and 40s and 50s was just, you know, pretty much taboo. Alcohol was the thing. Alcohol's still a thing, but weed was just really taboo. But during the mid-60s, I would say, during Vietnam era, the country really got angry about the war and the way the government was behaving and the way they still behave to this day, actually. But it created the counterculture of the hippies and peace, love, and, you know, peace and love, and smoke weed, and, you know, do drugs, make love, not war, those type of things, you know, and smoke weed and free love and hippies, that kind of a thing. And weed got really popular, but the only accessible weed really big time at that point in time came from Mexico, mostly. I mean, some of it came from Panama, you know, hence Panama Red, and Colombia, which was Acapulco Gold, and some from Hawaii, which was Maui Wowie. They used to grow it in the cane fields. But those strains were around. But the majority of marijuana that showed up in the 60s and 70s and early 80s was mostly from Mexico. And down in Mexico, they would just get a random handful of seeds and spread it out on the field. And they would let it grow. And if there was a few males involved, so what? They didn't even bother going out and cutting them out. They would just go in at harvest time, harvest the plants, cut off the majority of the buds, or almost all the buds, and leave most of the stems and stuff inside the buds, not even trim them up, brick it all up, and ship it north to America. Because they could get, you know, buku dollars for it. They could do acres and acres and acres and acres and acres of fucking plants. Of just junk plants, any kind of strain. So the average weed that you got up here in the United States during the 60s and 70s was 5 to 7% or 5 to 8% THC, because it was just, I don't want to be racist by anything, but it was considered junk Mexican back in the days. Well, then come along about 1965, Richard Nixon was in office, and he essentially started the drug war. Everybody acclaims the drug war to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was not the one that started the drug war. Richard Nixon was. Ronald Reagan only stepped it up a notch or two and really put a lot of funding towards it and so on and so forth. So during the 80s, when Ronald Reagan got into office, it really, the price of weed really skyrocketed because of the war on drugs. It got harder to get and so on and so forth. So people decided, you know what, we'll just grow our own at home. And every once in a while, I'm not going to say all South American Mexican weed was junk. There was a few good plants in there, like there always is in any random crop of things. That's how selection or unnatural selection of plants and horticulture through the years is we've been able to selectively breed plants. And well, a lot of Americans had Mexican seeds from down in Mexico, and they just started planting them probably. I'm not 100% certain, don't hold me to this. But all the meanwhile over in Europe and Amsterdam, they were actually cultivating good weed. So when the legalization started happening in the late 90s, early 2000s in America, well, it was probably the late 2000s actually, 2008, 2009 when things really started getting legalized. I think it was 2005 when California first legalized. I'm not 100% sure. I will check up on that to find out for certain. But the whole myth, the whole idea that weed has gotten better is totally incorrect. Maybe a little bit, maybe like 1 or 2 or 3%, but no more than 5% better than any strain or any top shelf strain, good strain that you could find in the 60s and 70s would stand up today. I guarantee it. Because they're still talked about today. Skunk number 1, Acapulco Gold, Panama Red, Maui Wowie, even Seattle Big Bud in a sense can be. But Seattle Big Bud was more, it was a mid-grade. I would say, from what I understand, it was about 15%. I mean, it wasn't your big 20s. So this whole myth, and my father and my Uncle Jimmy have been growing weed since the mid-80s. So I've seen junk plants that don't, I mean, they produce nice buds and everything looks good. I mean, it's like hemp. You can go down south, down to Kentucky and Nebraska and these places, and weed grows wild alongside the road. Great looking buds, smells wonderful, tastes wonderful, but you can smoke it all day long and it won't do nothing for you. So that's all I have to say is I don't like these people saying, oh, the weed's gotten better. No, it hasn't. It's just the accessibility of the good strains has become more and more prevalent because it's legal now. You can actually buy seeds from Amsterdam and from British Columbia. The good strains, something that's been tried, grown and tried and true. They know what it is. They know what's going to produce. And not only that, but our nutrients have gotten better. We've been able to actually scientifically we've been able to scientifically pinpoint what nutrients these plants really need, and we've been able to tailor our nutrients to them nowadays. It's because of the legalization of it. They're starting to allow that kind of thing. It's kind of like alcohol, how there's brandy and whiskey and wines and you got scotches and bourbons and all these fandangled types of alcohols, but essentially they're all alcohol. They have different tastes, and some people say different effects, so I don't know. But anyways, guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let your friends know about me. Share me around. I want to hear some more from you guys. Have a great night, and keep your bowls loaded, okay?